There are exactly 143 ways to die that the entire galaxy has collectively agreed are so monumentally stupid that no intelligent species should ever attempt them. The Interstellar Bureau of Reasonable Life Choices spent 6,000 years compiling this list, using probability matrices that would make your calculator weep, quantum statistical models that required 3 different types of theoretical mathematics that haven't been invented yet, and one very traumatized researcher who watched every single documented death in galactic history and now requires sedation whenever someone mentions the word velocity. And then humans looked at that list and said, "Hold my beer." Professor Thendrix Kowalczyk of the University of Sensible Decisions had spent his entire career studying species that valued self-preservation. He'd written 9 doctoral theses on the correlation between intelligence and survival instinct. His most famous work, Why Smart Things Don't Jump Off Cliffs, a comprehensive study, had won the Proxima Prize for stating the blindingly obvious. He was comfortable. He was respected. He had a nice office with a window that overlooked the methane gardens of his home planet, Rathika Prime. Then they assigned him to study Earth. The first report that crossed his desk was flagged with urgent in 15 different languages, including 3 that were just strings of panicked screaming translated into written form. Attached was a video file. Thendrix, being a thorough academic, made himself a cup of synthetic tea, settled into his ergonomic pod designed for maximum safety and comfort, and pressed play. 7 seconds later, he dropped the tea. 19 seconds later, his 3 hearts stopped beating in synchronized horror. 41 seconds later, he actually screamed, which was something his species hadn't done since they evolved past the whole having predators phase of their development, roughly 12 million years ago. The video showed a human jumping off a mountain, wearing nothing but a fabric suit that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd never heard of physics, engineering, or basic common sense. The human was flying. Well, technically falling, but falling in a very controlled way that suggested he knew what he was doing, which somehow made it worse. "This is impossible," Thendrix whispered to his empty office. The kinetic energy alone, the wind shear variables, the probability of structural failure in the suit, the complete and utter disregard for the mountain being very hard. He watched the human land with a parachute, which seemed almost responsible until Thendrix realized the human had opened said parachute approximately 3 seconds before impact. His hands were shaking as he checked the file metadata. This wasn't some ancient historical document. This had been uploaded to something called YouTube yesterday, and it had 4 million views. 4 million. Thendrix spent the next 6 hours going through what humans casually referred to as extreme sports videos. By hour 2, he'd developed a nervous twitch in his left eye. By hour 4, he'd started muttering mathematical impossibilities under his breath like some kind of statistical prayer. By hour 6, he was seriously considering whether the entire human species was actually an elaborate prank by the universe itself. Free solo climbing, cave diving without oxygen reserves, something called bull riding that involved sitting on an angry quadruped that was actively trying to kill you, base jumping, parkour across urban environments where every single surface was a potential head injury, surfing waves that were clearly marked by nature as "do not enter, death happens here." And the humans were smiling in all the videos. Smiling. "They're doing this for fun," Thendrix shrieked to his assistant, a calm and rational being named Plixora, who specialized in xenopsychology. "Not for mating rights, not for food, not for survival. They're paying money to do these things. There are businesses. There's an entire economy built around humans voluntarily risking death." Plixora examined the data with the kind of professional detachment that came from studying thousands of species. Fascinating. Their dopamine response to danger is approximately 900% higher than any other known sentient species. It's almost as if they're addicted to the neurochemical response of almost dying. Almost dying isn't a hobby, Thendrix shouted. For humans, apparently it is, Plixora said, scrolling through more videos. Oh dear, this one's labeled failed attempts. I don't think we should watch that. They watched it anyway. Thendrix needed medication afterward. The report he submitted to the Interstellar Bureau was 23,000 pages long, which was unusual because Thendrix typically prided himself on concise academic writing. But how could you be concise about a species that had invented something called free climbing, which was literally just climbing rocks without any safety equipment because, and this was a direct quote from one human, "It's more pure that way." Pure. Pure. The only pure thing about climbing a vertical rock face without ropes was the pure certainty of death if you made one single mistake. The Bureau read his report. Then they did something they'd never done in 6,000 years of operation. They called an emergency session. 73 different species sent their top experts on safety, biology, psychology, and physics. They reviewed Thendrix's findings. They watched the videos. They ran the calculations. And then Coordinator Veltrax of the Sensible Solutions Department stood up and made an announcement that would echo through the galaxy. "We need to stop them," Veltrax declared, his 12 eye stalks quivering with genuine concern. "For their own good, for the good of all statistical models, for the good of my sanity." The vote was unanimous. The Bureau would make first contact with Earth specifically to deliver the list of 143 banned extreme sports and officially prohibit humanity from killing themselves in mathematically predictable ways. They assembled the finest diplomatic team the galaxy had to offer. Ambassador Kernith, who'd successfully negotiated peace between 17 warring systems, xenobiologist Plixora, who understood human psychology better than most, Safety Inspector Mordax, who'd written the regulations for asteroid mining and had never lost a single worker to preventable death, and Professor Thendrix, who'd become the galaxy's reluctant expert on human insanity. The diplomatic vessel approached Earth with all appropriate protocols. They broadcast greetings in 600 languages. They transmitted their credentials. They waited for official governmental response. Instead, they got a guy named Trevor Mitchell. Trevor was a 32-year-old professional parkour athlete from Brisbane who happened to be checking his phone when the alien transmission came through on every electronic device simultaneously. He was also, at that exact moment, balanced on a railing 18 stories above street level, filming content for his Instagram. "Yeah, g'day," Trevor said into his phone, which was now displaying what looked like very official-looking aliens. "Bit busy at the moment. Can I call you back?" "Are you aware," Ambassador Kernith began in his most diplomatic voice, "that you are currently engaged in activity number 87 on the list of mathematically suicidal behaviors?" Trevor glanced down at the 18-story drop. "Parkour? Mate, this is nothing. You should see my Tuesdays." "Your Tuesdays?" This was Thendrix, who'd pushed his way into the video frame. What could possibly be worse than balancing on a thin metal rail 18 stories above concrete? "Urban buildering," Trevor said cheerfully, executing a perfect rail-to-wall transition that made 3 of the aliens physically recoil from their screens. "That's when you climb buildings without permission. Way more adrenaline, because you might get arrested and die. 2-for-1 thrill package, yeah?" There was a long silence from the alien ship. "We need to meet with your governmental leaders," Ambassador Kernith finally managed. "Immediately." "Yeah, righto. Hang on." Trevor called down to his friend who was filming from the ground. "Oi, Marcus. Aliens want to talk to the government. Should I give them the Prime Minister's number?" "No more Marcus," Thendrix screamed, startling everyone. "Why are so many of you named Marcus?" "It's a common name, mate. You all right? You look a bit stressed." "A bit stressed? You're 18 stories up on a railing." Yeah, but I've got good balance, Trevor said, executing a handstand for emphasis. 4 aliens fainted. The official first contact happened 3 days later at the United Nations headquarters in New York, which gave the human governments just enough time to panic, argue about protocol, and ultimately decide to let the aliens explain what they wanted before committing to any particular response strategy. Ambassador Kerneth stood before the assembled representatives of Earth's nations and began his carefully prepared speech. People of Earth, we come in peace and with grave concern. Our analysis of your species has revealed a troubling pattern. You engage in activities that have a mathematical certainty of catastrophic failure. You do this willingly. You do this repeatedly. You do this for something you call fun. He pressed a button, and a holographic display showed the list of 143 banned extreme sports. These activities have been prohibited across 862 civilized worlds. The probability matrices are clear. These activities represent an unacceptable risk to intelligent life. The UN Secretary-General, a composed woman named Patricia O'Cuffer, studied the list carefully. Ambassador, I appreciate your concern, but I feel I should point out that humans have been doing most of these activities for quite some time. We're still here. Yes, but how many of you aren't still here? Thendrix burst out, unable to contain himself. Your mortality statistics are horrifying. Do you know how many humans die every year from accidents that were completely preventable? Do you know how many humans exist? Patricia counted calmly. We're currently at about 8 billion. Some risk is acceptable when you're talking about species-level survival. Some risk? Thendrix was vibrating now. Activity number 12 on our list is free solo climbing. Do you know what the survival rate is for someone who falls while free solo climbing? 0%, said a voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned. A lean man with chalk-dusted hands stood up. His name badge read, Dr. Felix Rothschild, professional climber, geological survey. The survival rate for a fall is 0%, Felix continued, walking toward the front. But the survival rate for not falling is 100%. That's why we train. That's why we practice. That's why we respect the rock. But why? Thendrix implored. Why not just not climb the deadly rocks? Felix smiled. Because they're there. The aliens looked at each other in complete bewilderment. That's not a reason, Mordax sputtered. That's just 3 words. Lots of things are there. Black holes are there. We don't jump into them. Have you tried? Someone in the audience muttered. Patricia cleared her throat. Ambassador, I think what my colleague is trying to express is that humans have a different relationship with risk than you might be accustomed to. We don't see these activities as suicidal. We see them as life-affirming. How is nearly dying life-affirming? Ambassador Kerneth's eye stalks were starting to knot themselves together. Because, Patricia said carefully, when you're that close to the edge, you're more alive than at any other moment. You're present, you're focused, every sense is heightened. It's not about dying, Ambassador, it's about living as intensely as possible. Plixora, who'd been quietly taking notes, spoke up. This is actually consistent with their neurological data. Humans appear to require periodic stress responses to maintain optimal mental health. Without challenge, without risk, they experience what they call depression. Then give them video games, Thendrix shouted. Simulate the danger. Don't actually risk disintegration. We do that too, Patricia said, but it's not the same. The body knows the difference between simulated danger and real danger. The feeling is completely different. Ambassador Kerneth drew himself up to his full height. Regardless of your philosophical position on risk, we cannot simply ignore this situation. The Interstellar Bureau of Reasonable Life Choices has voted unanimously to issue a formal prohibition on these activities. For your own safety and the preservation of intelligent life in this galaxy, we are officially banning all 143 extreme sports on this list. There was a moment of silence in the UN chamber. Then someone started laughing. It started as a chuckle from the back rows, then spread like a contagious sneeze through the assembly. Within 30 seconds, the entire United Nations was laughing. Not polite, diplomatic laughter, deep, genuine, tears streaming down faces laughter. Ambassador Kearnith looked confused. "I don't understand. Why are you making those sounds? Is this a threat response?" Patricia wiped her eyes. "Ambassador, I'm sorry. I truly am. But you have to understand something about humans. We are a species that was told by our own planet that we couldn't survive. And we not only survived, but thrived in every hostile environment Earth could throw at us. We've been told no by gravity, by physics, by common sense, by our own bodies. And every single time we've looked at that no and treated it as a challenge." "So you're refusing our help?" Kearnith asked, genuinely puzzled. "We're appreciating the concern," Patricia said diplomatically. "But we're also being realistic about human nature. You can't ban extreme sports, Ambassador. They're too deeply wired into who we are." "We have laws," Mordax interjected. "Regulations that carry the full weight of the Interstellar Bureau. We can enforce this." Patricia smiled. "Ambassador, we can't even stop humans from eating Tide Pods, which are clearly labeled as poisonous. I'm not sure how you expect to stop someone from base jumping." The meeting adjourned with the aliens completely bewildered and the humans completely unbothered. The next day, the Interstellar Bureau officially issued their prohibition, broadcasting it across every communication channel Earth possessed. The response was immediate. Within 6 hours, humanity had not only acknowledged the list of 143 banned extreme sports, but had created a new list, 200 additional extreme sports. They called it the Innovation List. Trevor Mitchell, the parkour athlete who'd been the first human to meet the aliens, posted a video that went viral across human internet and somehow made its way to alien monitoring systems. "Right, so the aliens gave us a list of things we're not supposed to do," Trevor explained, standing in front of a whiteboard covered in increasingly absurd drawings. "They think they know what's dangerous. They think they've calculated all the risks. But they've forgotten one crucial thing about humans." He grinned at the camera. "We're really creative when someone tells us no." The whiteboard revealed sport number 1 on the new list: volcano boarding, sledding down an active volcano on a piece of plywood. "They banned extreme skiing," Trevor continued. "Said it was too dangerous because of avalanches and trees and cliffs. But they didn't say anything about sliding down lava fields, technically different terrain, yeah? Not covered in their regulations." Sport number 2, underwater cave base jumping. "They banned cave diving. They banned base jumping, but they never said we couldn't combine them. You dive into an underwater cave system, find an air pocket with vertical space, set up a jump point, and Bob's your uncle." Sport number 3, zero-gravity parkour. "They've got rules about dangerous activities on planets, but the treaty doesn't specify anything about space stations. I've already contacted 5 different commercial space companies. We're making this happen." By the end of Trevor's video, he'd outlined 30 sports that technically didn't violate the alien prohibition because they exploited loopholes, combined banned activities in ways that created new activities, or took place in environments the aliens hadn't thought to regulate. The video reached 100 million views in 24 hours. More importantly, it reached Professor Thendricks. "No!" he screamed at his screen. "No! No! No! That's not how rules work! You can't just technicality your way around safety regulations!" "Actually," Plixora said, reading through the legal framework of the prohibition, "they can. Our regulations specifically ban activities by name and description. If humans modify the activity sufficiently that it becomes a new activity, it's technically not covered. Then we'll add more regulations. We tried that with the Velkrathi during their Industrial Revolution," Plixora reminded him gently. "They found so many loopholes that we eventually had to create the Department of Loophole Prevention, which itself became riddled with loopholes. We spent 300 years in recursive regulation hell before we just gave up and let them regulate themselves. Thendrix slumped in his chair. But they're going to kill themselves. Some of them might, Plixora agreed. But that's been true of humans since they first climbed down from trees, looked at a cliff and thought, I wonder what would happen if I jumped off that. Their entire evolutionary history is one long series of terrible ideas that somehow worked out. The situation escalated rapidly. Within 1 week, humans had not only created 200 new extreme sports, but had begun organizing competitions for them. There were sponsorships, prize money, entire television networks dedicated to broadcasting events that made alien observers literally nauseous. Sport number 43, magnetic repulsion, suit racing through urban environments. Humans wearing suits that magnetically repelled metal surfaces, essentially turning entire cities into pinball machines, with themselves as the ball. Sport number 68, storm chasing plus. Regular storm chasing, but you're required to be on a motorcycle driving toward the tornado while performing tricks. Sport number 91, extreme ironing, which apparently had existed for years and involved humans taking ironing boards to absurd locations like mountaintops, underwater, or while skydiving, and ironing clothes. The aliens couldn't even comprehend this one. It served no survival purpose. It had no practical application. It was dangerous and pointless, which somehow made it worse than just being dangerous. They're ironing shirts while falling through the sky, Mordax wailed, watching footage from an extreme ironing championship. The shirt doesn't need to be ironed, and even if it did, there are safer places to do it. It's the absurdity that's the point, Plixora explained, though even she seemed puzzled. Humans appear to find humor in juxtaposing mundane activities with life-threatening situations. It's a form of existential comedy. Comedy! They're risking death for comedy? You've clearly never seen what they call stand-up comedy, Plixora muttered. Some of those audiences look genuinely threatening. The Interstellar Bureau called an emergency session. Representatives from 862 civilized worlds gathered to discuss the human problem. For 6 straight hours, they watched videos, reviewed data, and tried to understand how a single species could be so uniformly committed to dangerous activities. Perhaps we could offer alternatives, suggested Ambassador Vorath of the Cautious Collective. Entertainment that provides similar neurological rewards without the death risk? We tried that, Thendrix said wearily. He'd aged considerably in the past month. His scales had lost their luster, and he'd developed a persistent stress rash. We offered them access to our virtual reality systems, perfect simulations, absolute safety, identical neurological response. And, Vorath prompted, they said, and this is a direct quote, "Yeah, but it's not real though, is it?" Then they went back to something called free diving, which is holding your breath underwater until your brain starts shutting down, apparently for fun. What about education? Another delegate suggested. Surely if we show them the statistical certainty of injury or death, they'll reconsider. They know the statistics, Thendrix exploded. They calculate them. There are entire human academic disciplines dedicated to studying injury and death in extreme sports. They have PhD programs, peer-reviewed journals, and you know what they do with all that research. They use it to make the sports slightly safer so they can do them more often. There was a collective shudder through the assembly. What if, Coordinator Veltrax said carefully, we simply accepted that humans are an anomaly? Let them do their dangerous activities on their own planet, quarantine Earth, and move on with our lives. We considered that, Ambassador Kernith said grimly. But there's a problem. Other species are starting to watch. He brought up viewing statistics. Human extreme sports broadcasts had become the most watched programming in galactic history. Species that had never even conceived of recreational danger were now tuning in by the billions to watch humans do things that violated every principle of sensible behavior. "It's like a horror show," Plixora explained, "but one you can't look away from. Species are gathering in viewing parties to watch humans do things like wingsuit proximity flying, where they wear fabric suits and fly within meters of solid rock at 200 kilometers per hour. "That's activity number 19 on the banned list," someone shouted. "Yes, well, humans created Wingsuit Proximity Flying Plus, where they fly even closer to rocks while going through tunnels and caves. Technically a different sport." The meeting descended into chaos. Delegates were arguing in 16 different languages. Proposals ranged from complete isolation of Earth to mandatory sedation of all humans to somehow recruiting humans as a military force, since they clearly didn't understand self-preservation. That last suggestion came from the Vrexian Empire, a militaristic civilization that had been at peace for 600 years, primarily because everyone was too afraid to fight them. Their representative, General Craxus, stood with all four arms crossed. "If humans are this reckless with their own lives," Craxus proposed, "imagine what they'd do to their enemies. We should recruit them." "Absolutely not!" Thendrix shrieked. "That would be using their dangerous tendencies as a weapon." "Isn't that better than letting them hurt themselves?" Craxus countered. The argument continued for another 3 hours before they reached a compromise. They would send a delegation to Earth to study human extreme sports firsthand, document everything, and attempt to find some common ground for coexistence. If that failed, they would consider more drastic measures. The delegation arrived on Earth 2 weeks later. Professor Thendrix, Ambassador Kirnith, Plixora, Mordax, and General Craxus, plus a team of medical personnel who were extremely nervous about the whole assignment. They landed in Interlaken, Switzerland, which Trevor Mitchell had helpfully suggested was a pretty good spot to see what humans are about. What Trevor had failed to mention was that Interlaken was the extreme sports capital of Earth, hosting everything from paragliding to skydiving to canyoning to base jumping off the nearby mountains. The aliens emerged from their ship to find humans literally falling from the sky in every direction. "Oh gods!" Thendrix screamed, diving back into the ship. "They're raining. Humans are raining from the sky." "Those are paragliders," Trevor explained, strolling up with his hands in his pockets. "Totally safe. Well, mostly safe. Probably safe. Depends on the wind." "Depends on the wind?" "Yeah, but that's what makes it exciting, yeah?" Ambassador Kirnith, maintaining his diplomatic composure despite his eye stalks trembling, addressed Trevor formally. "We have come to observe and understand human recreational activities. We hope to find some basis for mutual understanding." "Right. Well, you're in the right spot," Trevor grinned. "We've got a full schedule lined up. Thought we'd start easy, maybe some rock climbing, then move into paragliding, bit of whitewater rafting. Then tomorrow we've got some base jumping scheduled, and if you're still standing by the weekend, there's a special demonstration planned." "What kind of demonstration?" Plixora asked suspiciously. Trevor's grin widened. "Sport number 200, world premiere. It's gonna be mental." The next 6 days were a systematic destruction of everything the aliens thought they knew about risk assessment and reasonable behavior. Day 1 started with indoor rock climbing, which seemed almost safe, until the aliens realized the humans were climbing without looking at the holds, sometimes blindfolded, treating the whole thing as casually as the aliens might treat walking. "It's just pattern recognition," explained a climber named Yuki Tanaka, hanging upside down from an overhang with just her fingertips and toes keeping her attached to the wall. "Your body learns the movements. Then it's just meditation with altitude." "Meditation shouldn't involve possible death," Mordax wailed. They progressed to outdoor climbing in the afternoon. Felix Rothschild, the geologist from the UN meeting, took them to a cliff face that looked to the aliens like a perfectly smooth vertical impossibility. "This is a 5.12 C climb," Felix explained, chalking his hands. Moderate difficulty. Moderate! Vendrix's voice had gone up several octaves. It's a vertical rock face. Yeah, but see those little divots? Those are holds. You just gotta trust your feet and keep your center of gravity close to the wall. Felix started climbing, moving up the face with the casual confidence of someone walking upstairs. Halfway up, he paused, hanging from what appeared to be nothing but friction and willpower. The thing about climbing, Felix called down, is that it's all about problem-solving. Each route is a puzzle. Your body is the solution, and if you solve it wrong, well, he grinned. That's why we practice. What happens if you don't solve it wrong? Vendrix shouted up. Then I fall. Felix laughed, as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. General Craxus, watching through military-grade optical enhancers, muttered, tactically fascinating, a species that treats potentially lethal situations as recreational puzzles, the psychological warfare applications alone. No! Everyone else shouted simultaneously. Day 2 involved paragliding. The aliens were assured this was one of the safer extreme sports, which did not fill them with confidence. They stood on a mountain launch site, watching humans strap fabric wings to their backs and simply run off the edge of a mountain. The physics are actually quite sound, explained an instructor named Rashid Al-Mansour, adjusting his harness. The paraglider creates lift. You control direction with the brake lines, and as long as you respect the weather and understand air currents, it's perfectly reasonable. And if you don't respect the weather? Plixora asked. Rashid shrugged. Then you have an adventure. Sometimes you land in a tree, sometimes you get caught in a thermal and go way higher than planned. Sometimes, he paused, grinning, sometimes you do a spiral dive for fun. A what? It's when you pull one brake hard and spin in tight circles while descending rapidly. Makes you dizzy as hell, but it's absolutely brilliant. He ran off the mountain before anyone could stop him. The aliens watched in horror as Rashid caught air, his paraglider filling and lifting him up above the launch site. Then he did exactly what he'd described, pulling into a tight spiral that sent him spinning toward the ground like a falling leaf. 3 aliens required medical attention for stress-induced cardiac episodes. That evening, Trevor took them to a traditional Swiss restaurant to decompress, which the aliens were extremely grateful for, until they realized he'd chosen a restaurant specifically because it had a view of the Lauterbrunnen base jumping area. As they tried to eat, humans kept appearing in the air outside the windows, having jumped off the cliffs above, falling past the restaurant, deploying parachutes at what seemed like suicidally low altitudes. Could we perhaps eat somewhere without falling humans? Ambassador Kernith requested weakly. Nah, this is the best view, Trevor said cheerfully. Besides, I figured you'd want to see base jumping since that's on your banned list. It's number 3 on our banned list, Mordax snapped, right between attempting to hug stars and racing starships through asteroid fields while blindfolded. Wait, someone tried to hug a star? Trevor perked up. That's metal. Did it work? No, they died. That's why it's banned. Yeah, but did they get close? The aliens stared at Trevor in collective horror. Day 3 brought whitewater rafting, which started badly when the instructor, a cheerful woman named Rosa Vega, explained that rapids were rated from Class 1 to Class 6, and they'd be doing Class 5. What happens at Class 6? Plixora asked nervously. Class 6 is considered unraftable, Rosa explained. People die attempting it. But don't worry, Class 5 is only mostly dangerous. Mostly? The rafting trip was a sustained nightmare of water, rocks, and humans whooping with joy as they navigated through hydraulics that could flip their raft or slam them into boulders. The aliens clung to their observation platform, a safe viewing area Rosa had set up, and watched in absolute disbelief. At one point, the raft did flip. 6 humans were suddenly in churning white water, being swept downstream toward what looked like certain death. The aliens started screaming, calling for emergency services, preparing for casualties. The humans just swam to the side, climbed out, high-fived each other and asked if they could go again. "Did you not nearly die?" Thendrix shrieked. "Yeah, that's what made it awesome." Rosa laughed, water streaming from her hair. "You feel so alive after a swim like that. You feel alive because you nearly weren't." "Exactly." General Craxus was taking detailed notes. "Remarkable resilience, no panic response, immediate return to danger source. These humans are either incredibly brave or completely insane." "Can't it be both?" Plixora muttered. Day 4 was skydiving. The aliens had argued against this strenuously, but Trevor insisted it was important for understanding the human perspective. "You don't have to jump," Trevor assured them. "Just come up in the plane, watch us exit, see how it works." They agreed to this compromise, which lasted exactly until they were at altitude, and Trevor casually mentioned, "Oh, by the way, this is also the day we're demonstrating sport number 56, skydiving without looking where you're going." "What?" Trevor pulled out a blindfold. "One of the new sports. You jump blindfolded, navigate by sound and feeling, deploy your chute based on counting seconds and air pressure changes. It's like meditation meets freefall." "No one is that calm while falling," Mordak screamed. Trevor put on the blindfold, gave a thumbs up, and walked backward out of the plane. 4 more aliens required cardiac intervention. The humans who'd accompanied them, all experienced skydivers, followed Trevor out. One by one, they tumbled into empty air, falling at terminal velocity, completely blind, somehow managing to track each other by sound and create formations. "This is impossible," Plixora whispered, her scientific mind struggling with the sensory data. "Humans don't have echolocation. They don't have air pressure sensors. They shouldn't be able to navigate blind while falling at 200 kilometers per hour. "But they are," Thendrix pointed out unnecessarily. The pilot, a calm older man named George, chuckled. "You haven't seen nothing yet. Wait till they deploy." "What happens then?" Ambassador Kernith asked, dreading the answer. "They've been practicing a new thing, where they navigate to each other under canopy while still blindfolded, trying to link up their parachutes by sound alone. Trevor's idea. Absolutely bonkers." "They're going to collide and die!" Thendrix shrieked. They didn't collide. They didn't die. They successfully linked 3 parachutes in a triangular formation, all while blindfolded, laughing and shouting coordinates to each other. When they landed, Trevor ripped off his blindfold and jogged over to the aliens, who'd returned to ground level and were huddled together for emotional support. "So, what did you think?" Trevor asked brightly. "I think you're all completely mad," Ambassador Kernith said quietly. "Yeah, probably," Trevor agreed. "But like mad in a fun way, yeah?" Day 5 brought them to an underground cave system for what Trevor described as adventure caving, which apparently differed from regular caving in that you deliberately chose the most difficult routes possible. The humans crawled through spaces barely wide enough for their bodies, squeezed through vertical shafts called squeezes that required exhaling completely to fit through, and swam through underwater sections called sumps, where a wrong turn meant drowning in absolute darkness. "This is literally my definition of hell," Plixora said, refusing to enter beyond the first chamber. "Fun though, innit?" said a caver named Emma Blackwood, who was about to dive into a sump that went down into complete darkness for an unknown distance. "You never know what you'll find. Sometimes there's an air pocket. Sometimes it opens into a massive cavern. Sometimes—" She grinned. "Sometimes you have to turn back, and that's the real skill, knowing when to quit." "How about quitting now?" Mordak suggested desperately. Emma laughed and dove into the dark water, disappearing from sight. The aliens waited in tense silence for 90 seconds, which felt like 90 years, before she surfaced in another chamber, her light visible through a narrow crack. "Gorgeous down there!" her voice echoed back. "Whole crystal formation. Totally worth it." "She could have died," Thendrix whimpered. "But she didn't," General Craxus observed thoughtfully. "She calculated the risk, she assessed her capabilities, and she succeeded. In military terms, this is excellent special operations training. Stop trying to weaponize human insanity! Day 6 was supposed to be a rest day. Instead, Trevor took them to an indoor facility where humans were practicing something called tricking, which appeared to be a combination of martial arts, gymnastics, and controlled falling, all set to loud music. It's about style and expression, explained a young athlete named Jordan Lee, who then proceeded to execute a sequence of moves that involved flipping, spinning, and kicking in ways that seemed to violate several laws of physics. But why? Thendrix begged. What purpose does this serve? Makes you feel incredible, Jordan said, landing a particularly complex move. And it looks cool. That's it? Looking cool? You risk snapping your spine for aesthetics? I mean, Jordan considered this. Yeah, pretty much. The aliens gave up trying to understand. They simply documented everything, filled hard drives with footage, and tried to maintain their sanity for one more day. Because day 7 was the demonstration of sport number 200. They gathered at the facility before dawn. The aliens were exhausted, traumatized, and seriously considering whether first contact had been a mistake. Trevor, by contrast, was more energetic than ever. "Right," he announced to the assembled crowd of humans, aliens, and media. "Sport number 200. We've been working on this for the past 3 weeks, ever since the aliens gave us their list of banned activities, and I reckon we've created something special." "What is it?" Ambassador Kernith asked tiredly. Trevor grinned. "We call it multi-dimensional extreme obstacle course racing." He pressed a button, and a massive structure was revealed. It was part climbing wall, part parkour course, part aerial rig, and part something the aliens couldn't even identify. It twisted in impossible directions, had sections that rotated, included water hazards, fire elements, and what appeared to be a wind tunnel in the middle. "The goal," Trevor explained, "is to get from start to finish as fast as possible, using any route you want, any technique you want. There are no rules except one. You have to keep moving. The moment you stop, you're disqualified." "And the safety measures?" Mordax asked weakly. Trevor pointed to some thin mats on the ground. "Crash pads." "That's it?" "Well, yeah. More safety gear would slow us down." The first athlete, a competitor named Arya Volkov, stepped up to the starting line. She was small, muscular, and had the look of someone who'd spent their entire life training for something exactly this insane. The countdown started. 3, 2, 1. Arya exploded forward. She vaulted over the first obstacle, twisted through a spinning section, launched herself at a climbing wall, and used her momentum to swing around to a cargo net, which she climbed at speed before leaping to a rope, which she used to swing across a water pit, letting go at the perfect moment to catch a bar, swing up and over, tuck into a roll across a narrow beam, spring back up into a wall run that took her to a higher level, where she immediately had to navigate through what looked like a spinning drum with random obstacles inside. The aliens watched in stunned silence. Arya moved like water, like wind, like something that had decided gravity was optional. She fell twice, hit the crash pads, bounced back up without breaking stride, and continued. The fire section made 3 aliens close their eyes. Arya ran through flames that singed her clothes, using the heat updrafts to time a leap to the next platform. The wind tunnel section was worse. She had to navigate through gale-force winds while climbing vertical surfaces. The wind literally blew her off the wall at one point. She caught herself on a passing obstacle, used the momentum to redirect, and kept going. Her time, 3 minutes, 18 seconds. "That was incredible!" she shouted, drenched in sweat, grinning like she'd just had the best experience of her life. The aliens couldn't speak. 5 more athletes ran the course. Each found different routes, different solutions, different ways of moving through space that seemed to defy basic physics. One athlete, a massive man named Dmitry Volkov, Arya's cousin, simply powered through obstacles that others went around, smashing through sections with pure strength and momentum. "This is beyond extreme sports," Plixora said quietly. They've created something new, something that didn't exist before. "And they did it in 3 weeks, Thendrix added, his voice hollow. "We gave them a list of banned activities, and in 3 weeks they created 200 new sports, and this is what they consider the pinnacle." Trevor jogged over. "Pretty good, yeah? We're thinking of making it an Olympic sport. Already got interest from 50 countries wanting to build their own courses. This is going to spread," Ambassador Kernith realized with horror. "This isn't going to stay on Earth. Humans are going to take these sports to other planets, space stations, colonies." "Oh yeah, definitely," Trevor confirmed cheerfully. "Already got a request from that Mars settlement to design a zero-gravity version. Gonna be sick." That evening, the delegation gathered in their ship to compile their final report. They were supposed to provide recommendations, solutions, a path forward for human-alien relations regarding the extreme sports problem. Instead, they sat in silence, watching footage from the week, trying to find words that would adequately explain what they'd witnessed. "They're not going to stop," Plixora finally said. "We can't ban them, we can't regulate them, we can't understand them. This is simply who humans are. More than that," General Craxus added, surprising everyone. "They've shown us something we'd forgotten. The entire galaxy has become comfortable, safe, controlled. We've eliminated risk to the point where we've eliminated a certain kind of vitality." "You're not suggesting we adopt their behaviors?" Thendrix sputtered. "No. My species would never survive it. Neither would most of yours. But perhaps," Craxus paused thoughtfully, "perhaps we need to accept that humans serve a purpose in the galaxy. They remind us that safety isn't the only value worth preserving. Sometimes the attempt to eliminate all risk eliminates something essential." "No, that's very philosophical," Mordax said dryly, "but it doesn't solve our problem." "What if there is no problem?" Ambassador Kernith suggested quietly. "What if we've been approaching this incorrectly? We tried to protect humans from themselves, but they don't want protection. They want challenge, risk, the feeling of being fully alive. So we just let them continue?" Thendrix asked. "Do we have a choice?" Kernith countered. "We've seen what happens when we tell them no. They create more dangerous activities. Perhaps the solution is to simply document them, study them, and maybe occasionally learn from them." The report they submitted to the Interstellar Bureau was unprecedented in its brevity. After 6,000 years of detailed statistical analysis and comprehensive safety recommendations, the report on humanity consisted of 3 sections. Section 1, Findings. Humans engage in extreme sports due to neurological, psychological, and cultural factors that are deeply embedded in their species' identity. These activities cannot be eliminated through regulation, prohibition, or education. Section 2, Recommendations. Accept human extreme sports as a species-specific behavior. Establish observation protocols for scientific study. Do not attempt to interfere unless human activities directly threaten other species. Section 3, Warnings. Humans will continue to create new extreme sports regardless of external input. Current count, 200 new activities in 1 month. Projection, unlimited. Avoid attempting human extreme sports without extensive genetic and psychological modification. Viewing said, activities may cause distress in species with strong self-preservation instincts. The response from the Bureau was predictable chaos. Species that valued safety were horrified. Species that valued freedom were intrigued. Species that valued entertainment immediately started buying broadcasting rights to human extreme sports competitions. Within 6 months, Earth Sports Network became the most popular channel in galactic history. Billions of aliens tuned in to watch humans do things that no sane being would attempt. It became a bizarre form of cultural exchange, where humans demonstrated the absolute limits of biological possibility, and aliens watched from a safe distance with a mixture of horror, fascination, and respect. Trevor Mitchell became an overnight galactic celebrity. His social media following expanded to include 93 different species. He received sponsorship offers from companies on planets he'd never heard of, and he absolutely loved it. "This is brilliant," he told Felix during a video call that was being broadcast to 4 billion viewers. "We're not just pushing human limits anymore, we're showing the entire galaxy what's possible." "We've also received 14 formal requests from alien researchers wanting to study human athletes," Felix added. "Apparently our bone density, muscle response time, and pain tolerance are anomalous compared to other species." "We're freaks," Trevor said cheerfully. "Galactic freaks, I'm making t-shirts." The t-shirts sold out across 800 star systems. Professor Thendricks, meanwhile, had undergone a transformation. After 6 months of studying humans and recovering from his initial breakdown, he'd published a revolutionary paper, Reconsidering Risk, Why Safety Might Not Be the Ultimate Value. It was controversial, it was criticized, it was also read more than any other xenobiological paper in history. "What I've realized," Thendricks said during a lecture at the University of Sensible Decisions, "is that we've been asking the wrong question. We kept asking, why do humans risk death, when we should have been asking, what are we missing by avoiding all risk?" He pulled up footage of Arya Volkov completing the multi-dimensional extreme obstacle course, her face showing pure joy despite the obvious danger. "Look at her expression. That's not fear. That's not recklessness. That's engagement with life at a level we've forgotten exists. We've made existence safe, but have we made it worth existing?" The lecture hall was silent. "I'm not suggesting we all start base jumping," Thendricks continued, his scales now healthy and lustrous again. "Different species have different needs. But perhaps we can learn from humans that there's value in challenge, in pushing boundaries, in occasionally doing something that makes your hearts race, your adrenaline spike, and reminds you that you're alive." The lecture received a standing ovation, which was unprecedented for a species that typically expressed approval through color changes. Plixora built an entire career on studying human risk-taking behavior. Her book, The Humans Who Jump: Understanding Voluntary Danger in Intelligent Species, became required reading in xenopsychology programs across the galaxy. Ambassador Karenith successfully lobbied for Earth to receive a special exemption status in the Interstellar Bureau regulations. Humans could continue their extreme sports without interference, provided they signed waivers acknowledging they understood the risks and weren't holding anyone else responsible for their choices. Humans, naturally, signed everything immediately and went back to inventing new ways to almost die. General Craxus never did recruit humans for military purposes, but he did establish an exchange program where young Vrexian soldiers could visit Earth and observe human training methods, not to adopt them, but to learn about mental resilience and creative problem-solving under pressure. Mordax retired from safety inspection and wrote a memoir titled, I Survived Studying Humans and You Can Too. It was filed under comedy in most galactic libraries. The insurance nightmare continued indefinitely. No galactic insurance company would offer policies to human extreme sports athletes. Human insurance companies simply accepted this as normal, created specialized extreme sports policies, and charged rates that would make most species faint. Humans paid them without complaint, which confused everyone even more. The count of human extreme sports reached 312 within a year. Sport number 208 involved riding modified motorcycles on ice. Sport number 243 was underwater cave diving, while solving complex mathematics problems. Sport number 291 was competitive building climbing in zero-gravity environments. And humans kept creating more. Trevor was in the middle of planning sport number 313, which he described as parkour but on a comet, when he received a message from Professor Thendricks. "I wanted to thank you," Thendricks wrote. "When I first studied your species, I thought you were insane. I spent weeks trying to stop you from killing yourselves, but you've taught me something valuable. You've reminded the galaxy that there's more to life than simply existing safely. You've shown us that sometimes the risk is the point, that sometimes the challenge of doing something difficult, something dangerous, something unnecessary is what makes life meaningful." Trevor read the message, smiled, and typed back, "No worries, mate. Just doing what humans do, yeah? But if you ever want to try base jumping, the offer's open. Reckon you'd love it once you got past the terror." Thendricks' response was immediate. "Absolutely not. But I'll enjoy watching you do it from a safe distance with appropriate safety observers and medical personnel on standby." Fair enough. The relationship between humanity and the galaxy settled into something that resembled functional coexistence. Aliens accepted that humans were going to continue doing insane things. Humans accepted that aliens thought they were insane, and both parties found ways to benefit from this arrangement. Human extreme sports became a galactic phenomenon, not because other species wanted to participate, but because they needed to see it. They needed to know that somewhere in the universe there was a species that looked at safety regulations, probability matrices, and common sense and said, "Yeah, but what if we didn't?" It was inspiring in a terrifying sort of way, and perhaps that was the real lesson. Not that risk was good or bad, not that safety was overrated or essential, but that the universe was big enough for multiple perspectives on what made life worth living. For most of the galaxy, life was about minimizing danger and maximizing comfort. For humans, life was about finding the edge between possible and impossible, standing on that edge, looking down at the very real chance of death or injury, and jumping anyway, not because they didn't understand the risk, but because they understood something else entirely. They understood that sometimes you're most alive when you're closest to not being alive at all. The Bureau never did figure out how to regulate human extreme sports. They stopped trying after sport number 400, which involved human athletes creating a parkour course on a moving spacecraft traveling between solar systems. The logistics alone violated 17 different regulations, but technically didn't break any actual laws, because nobody had thought to specifically ban parkour on relativistic vehicles. The count was still climbing, and somewhere, in a small apartment in Brisbane, Trevor Mitchell was looking at preliminary designs for sport number 500. "Multi-species cooperative extreme sports," he muttered, sketching ideas. "Humans and aliens working together to accomplish something completely unnecessary and ridiculously dangerous. Yeah, this is gonna be beautiful." He paused, looked at the night sky visible through his window, and grinned. "Thanks for the list, aliens," he said to the stars. "Best inspiration we ever got." Above Earth, monitoring satellites continued recording data on human extreme sports activities, dutifully documenting each new variation, each innovation, each moment when a human decided that the best response to gravity, common sense, and statistical probability was a cheerful "watch this." The galaxy watched, the galaxy learned, and most importantly, the galaxy accepted. Humans were going to human, regardless of what anyone else thought about it. And somewhere in a university office on Rethica Prime, Professor Thendricks looked at his latest research data, smiled his species equivalent of a smile, and added one final note to his ongoing study of humanity. "They're still impossible," he wrote. "They're still insane. They're still doing things that should kill them, but somehow don't, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The universe is more interesting with humans in it, falling off things with smiles on their faces and absolute confidence that they'll stick the landing. Sometimes they don't, but they keep trying. That's the real miracle. Not that they survive, but that they keep trying.